Hello, this is Shadow of the Moon, and today we're going to be starting our Halloween deck profile for the month of October. So that means a deck a week is going to be posted, and it's going to be new decks that you have not seen on this channel. So definitely make sure you check out these videos. And what better way to start the Halloween spooky themed deck profiles than with my Infernity deck. This is a lot of fun. I love Infernities because of the whole handless combo or handless death in the manga. If you haven't read it, I would highly recommend you read it. It was a great series, and it is a lot different from the anime, just like a lot of the manga is. But just shift gears for a second. I always pride myself on having more budget-friendly deck profiles on this channel, mainly because I prefer it that way, and I think, you know, you have enough deck profiles and channels that showcase a lot of very expensive decks and, you know, everything. But just to keep, for that sake, this is not going to be one of those deck profiles or one of those decks, period. Infernity, this one actually cost me to build about $100, and that's on the low end. These decks can get a little more expensive, and just keep in mind, Infernity decks aren't exactly, they're not bad. I'm not saying they're bad by all means, because I absolutely adore this deck, but they're not exactly going to be like competitive level tier 0 or any of that by any means. They are a lot of fun, and this is actually more of a budget Infernity deck. You can combine them with PKs, and you can make them a lot faster, but I chose to go with this because it's, like I said, this is more of a budget-friendly deck, and it's something that you can easily pick up and play, and it's just a lot of fun just to be able to swarm the entire field with all these monsters and being able to actually go into Appaloosa. Sadly, out of all of, like, the enforcers of the 5Ds, like their decks and stuff, like out of Yusei, Crow, Jack Atlas, and Colin kind of got the short end of the stick. They did get support in Phantom Rage with Wildcat, which is in this deck, and a few of the other cards. But for the most part, since they since they limited Infernity Archbin and Infernity Launcher to 1, it kind of did cripple the deck. I know why they did it, but I think by now that they should be unbanned for the most part, because no one's really running around with this kind of deck anyways. Alright, so without any further ado, let's go ahead finally and get started. And if you're wondering about this really nice, cool playmat that I got, the new one, I actually got this off of Etsy for about $15. You should go check it out. Etsy has a lot of really cool products, and their mats are usually going to be a little bit cheaper. They actually can be cheaper sometimes than eBay, and they may have more of a variety selection for you. So without any further ado, like I said, let's go ahead and get started with this spooky deck profile. Alright, so first is going to be Infernity General. Infernity General, when he is in the graveyard, you can banish him to special summon 2 level 3 or lower Infernity monsters from your graveyard. That's going to really help out your plays in this deck to be able to swarm the field. Plus, since he's a 2700 monster, I mean, it's easy to actually special summon him from the field by using a lot of their other effects. Alright, then we've got the original guy himself, Infernity Archbin. Like I said, he's only limited to 1, and if you draw into this card, you can special summon it, and if you control no cards in your hand, you can add an Infernity card from your deck to your hand, which is insane. Be able to add all kinds of your Infernity monsters or spells and traps from your deck to your hand if he's the only one, if you have no cards in your hand, because he really adds a lot of fuel to this deck. And like I said, I wish he was at 3, but you can't, I guess, pick them all. Alright, then we've got Infernity Patriarch. Infernity Patriarch is a quick special summon. If you control no cards in your hand, you can special summon this card from your hand, so it's a really good way to extend your plays. And then this is the wild card in the deck, so just be prepared for this. 3 copies of Infernity Wildcat. You do not have to run 3, you can run 2 if you want. I have never had a problem running 3 Infernity Wildcats. Basically, you discard an Infernity card to special summon this from your hand, and then by banishing an Infernity monster, if you control no cards in your hand, you can make its level either go up by 1 or decrease by 2. Now, why that's important is if you have a level 4 monster and you have this guy on the field, you can go into your level 8 synchros. It's a lot easier to be able to go into. Also, if you have 2 level 6s, you can decrease its level by up to 2, and then make it a level 8 to be able to go into your synchro plays. And it's a really good way to get a lot of your Exceed, Link, synchro monsters on the field. Since this does actually have quite a bit of synchros in this deck, it's one of the most important cards in the deck, in my opinion. And it came out in Phantom Rage, so I'm at least glad that we got support for it. Alright, then we've got 1 copy of the card that came out in Phantom Rage, is Infernity Conjure. If you control no cards in your hand, you can special summon this from the graveyard. This is another really good extender for the deck because it adds more field presence. And then 2 copies of Infernity Necromancer. Infernity Necromancer, if you control no cards in your hand, first off, this is going to go to defense mode when it's normal summoned. But if you control no cards in your hand, you can special summon an Infernity monster from your graveyard. So, also, since it has 2,000 defense, it's a really good wall, and it's actually can be somewhat hard to get over, especially on the first turn. Alright, this next play is going to be a little bit confusing for you, so you may not understand it, but trust me, there's a reason why I'm playing it. Three copies of Infernity Beetle. Now, yes, I do recognize this is not one of the best Infernity cards, and it is definitely not worth playing a lot of times for a lot of people. The reason I'm running 3 in here is because it doesn't stop me. Also, because of its effect, if you control no cards in your hand, you can tribute the Infernity Beetle to special summon up to 2. That is really good to actually go into Djinn Buster, because Djinn Buster requires your 2 level 2 monsters. So that is a really good way to get into your Djinn Buster to stop your opponent's Nibiru or hand traps. Alright, so then we've got 3 copies of probably one of the best tuners in the stack, Infernity Mirage. Now, Infernity Mirage cannot be special summoned from the graveyard. That's fine, though, because if you're playing cards like 1-for-1 and stuff, you can easily get this out onto the field, special summon it that way. Also, if you tribute this, you can special summon up to 2 Infernity cards from your graveyard. So that is really, really important because it adds a lot of gas and a lot of fuel, and just really it can make you go into a lot of your plays. That's why I always run 3, because it doesn't slow me down at all. And then just 1 copy of the other one, the Infernity Avenger. This guy isn't really seen in much play much nowadays just because of its effect. But if your Infernity card is destroyed by battle or something, you can special summon this card from the graveyard. So it's also, the level of this card is equal to the level of the destroyed monster. So if it does get destroyed, I only run the 1 because it doesn't really come up as often as a Mirage, but it's still a really good card because it is a level 1, and that's kind of what you're wanting to go for. So that's going to be it for the Infernity. So let's go into the tech cards. Technically, this, in my opinion, should be an Infernity Stygian Street Patrol. If you banish this card from the graveyard, you can special summon a card from your hand. So that is going to be really important because that's another way to empty out your hand to be able to just swarm the field. Alright, so when I said that this deck is budget, the reason why it's budget is you can run the level 3 danger cards if you want to, like Tsuchinoko or whatever, and then the other one, Jackalope, but I run 2 copies of Danger Mothman. Now, the reason I'm running this is a really good way to go into your level 8 synchro plays. So if they discard a card that isn't Danger Mothman, you can special summon this from your hand. So it'll be a level 4. Also, if they do discard it, you get to draw a card. But I run this because this is a cheaper version of this other danger cards, and also since it's level 4, if you have this in Wildcat, you can go into your level 8 synchro play. And then without an Infernity deck, you gotta have the package. You always have to have it. This is one of the best cards in this deck, in my opinion. You've got 3 copies of Tour Guide of the Underworld. So you guys know what this does by now. You can, when you normal summon this card, you can special summon a level 3 Fiend-type monster from your deck, but its effects are negated. So that's a good way to go into the new Infernity Doom Archbin, which is level 6, or it's another good way to go into some of your plays. It negates the effect, but it's a good way to get the monster on the field. Alright, then 1 copy of Archfiend Harris. Archfiend Harris is strictly in here because to get Infernity Archfiend into your hand. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can immediately add a Archfiend card from your deck to your hand. So the only Archfiend card that you're playing other than this is going to be your Infernity Archfiend. And then lastly for the monsters, we've got 1 copy of Edge Imp Sabers. I actually debated for the longest time to whether or not to keep this in here. But all in all, I decided to add it because if you discard a card, if this is in your graveyard, if you discard a card, you can special summon this from the graveyard. It just negates its effect. So it's a really good way to get into to swarm the field and be able to get into your link plays to go into Appaloosa or go into Borload or whatever have you. So it's a really good extender definitely for this deck. Alright, so that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's move on to the spells and traps. So first, we've got the Infernity Launcher. One of the best cards in this deck, in my opinion. So this allows you to discard a card, and then if you have no cards in your hand, you contribute this card to special summon an Infernity monster from your graveyard. So it is essential for this deck, because you want to be able to get Infernities back from the graveyard to special summon and swarm. Then we've got one copy of Infernity Paranoia, the new card that came out in Phantom Rage. If you tribute a dark monster, you special summon an Infernity monster from your deck or graveyard with the same level, but a different name. Negate its effects, and then during your main phase, except the turn that this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish it, and then target an Infernity monster and add it back to your hand. So it's a good way to recycle your Infernity monsters, and it's just all around being able to tribute one to special summon if you're not able to use it. Like, if you want to, if you have this, you can bring out like a Wildcat or something, if you've used Tour Guide, and then you can tribute Wildcat to add another Wildcat from your deck to your hand, and then discard a monster to special summon that. Alright, so then we're going to have run 3 copies of Void Apocalypse. This is essential for this deck. This allows you to discard stuff as well, because you can discard a card, send a Fiend-type monster from your deck to the graveyard, and you can send this face-up card from your spell and trap zone to the graveyard to send an Infernoid monster from different names from your hand or deck to the graveyard. But you're using this mainly to discard a card to send a Fiend-type monster from your deck to the graveyard. That is why it's essential in this deck. Everything in this deck, minus like Mothman, is a Fiend-type, so it's good to be able to go into your plays by sending them to the graveyard, because they all need to end up in the graveyard. I cannot stress that enough. Alright, and then one copy of Into the Void. Into the Void is an amazing card, because if you have 3 or more cards in your hand, first off, you draw a card, and if you do during your end phase, you can discard your entire hand if you still have cards in your hand. So it's great to be able to draw, and then you can just discard your entire hand. Then, speaking of discarding your entire hand, probably the only time in history of Yu-Gi-Oh! That I will ever play this card in a deck. Card Destruction. This wipes your opponent's hand for any hand traps. This wipes your hand, but also allows you to have gas for your Infernity monsters. And then one copy of Upstart Goblin to be able to draw into your plays. One copy of 1-for-1 to be able to to discard a monster to special summon your Infernity Mirage or Avenger from the deck. One copy of Foolish Burial to put one of your Infernities into the graveyard to start your plays. And then lastly, one copy of Monster Reborn. Alright, so that's it for the spells. Let's move on to these traps. So you can run Infernity Barrier or Infernity Barrier if you want. I'm running Suppression because I actually found it to be a little more consistent. With Infernity Barrier, you have to have a face-up attack position Infernity monster, and sometimes that may not be the case. So Infernity Suppression, if you have no cards in your hand, you can activate this card the turn it was set, which makes it a great play because you can activate it the turn that it's set. When your opponent activates a monster effect, you control an Infernity monster, you can negate it, and then you can inflict damage to your opponent equal to the activating monster's level times 100. So I like this card mainly in here because you can activate it the turn that it's set. That's why it's in here. Infernity Barrier is still a great card because you can negate a spell trap or monster effect, but you usually have to wait a turn, and you have to have a face-up attack position Infernity monster. Alright, then one copy of Infernity Break. If you have no cards in your hand, you can select an Infernity card from your graveyard, remove it, and then select one card your opponent controls and destroy it. So it's a good little one-up, because them being removed from play is not going to damage you at all, especially if you have what I'm going to be showing you in the extra deck. So that's it for the main deck. Let's go on to the extra deck. So first, you're going to run 2 copies of 100 Eyes Dragon. This is one of the best cards in this deck for the extra deck because it can copy its name and its effect for a monster by removing from play level 6 or lower dark effect monster, which is basically anything in this deck minus in general. And then it copies its effect, and it copies its name. So that really comes in handy because if it makes it an Infernity card in and of itself. So you can play cards like Infernity Suppression, or you can play any card that allows you to activate their effects. You could tribute it to special summon them from the graveyard, or whatever. That's why this card is very valuable in this deck, and very good because of that reason. Because it essentially becomes an Infernity monster. Alright, and then one copy of Void Ogre Dragon. Void Ogre Dragon can negate spells and traps if you have no cards in your hand, once per turn. This is one of my favorites to put in here. Beazle of the Diabolic Dragons. It cannot be destroyed by battle or by card effects, and it's a 3K, and it's just hard to get off the field. Plus, it works with the deck really, really well because it's a dark dragon. So, all right. Next, we have your negate. Draco Berserker of the Tenyu, this is going to be your Omni Negate. If you want to choose Borreload Savage, you can go with that. I just chose this because it's easier to bring out. This negates opponent's spell and trap or monster effect. And then lastly for the Synchros, 2 copies of the new Infernity Doom Archfiend. This is a really easy card to bring in, go into. So if you control no cards in your hand, you can target a face-up card on the field, negate its effects until the end of the turn. If you have no cards, you can also destroy it. So that's definitely an additional effect to be able to go into because you can negate it. And if you have no cards, you can completely destroy it. Also, if you have no cards in your hand, if this card battles an opponent's monster, any battle damage this card inflicts to your opponent is doubled. So that is just insane to be able to bring him out because he is actually really, really good. And the reason I said that it's not a pain to be able to get your Infernity monsters to be able to be removed from play is to make sure you have your copy of Olivia the Sea Dragon to be able to bring back your banished monsters. 1 copy of Jin Buster. This is what I was talking about earlier with the Infernity Beetle. Very easy way to bring this out and also unclogs your deck. And then your Borreload Savage Dragon, because you can easily get 4 monsters on the field with 3,000 monster that has an effect that can't be targeted or destroyed by card effects. Then your Saryuja Skull Dread. This is great to be able to add cards to your hand and then put them back on the bottom of the deck. So this lets you draw your cards and then add the other ones back to the bottom of the deck. And it's very easy to bring out. And then, like I said before, you've got your Appaloosa, Bow of the Goddess. This will be your negates. And then you can have your Cherubini, Ebony of the Angel of the Burning Abyss. This is a way to get your level 3 Infernity cards, and this makes its attack, but this is, it's best, it basically acts as a Foolish Burial for them, and also an Archfiend Harris, which is what I use it for. Also, the monsters this card points to cannot be destroyed by card effects. Alright, then you've got your Barricading Blocker. This is going to be a way to get your Infernity Launcher or any of your continuous spell cards back. And then lastly, just to pop, you've got your Nightmare Phoenix. It's easy to bring this out. I don't run Unicorn in this deck because you only need to run this since you have other ways, and the extra deck kind of needs what it has. But this is a really good card to add it because it does pop. Alright, so that's it for the Infernity deck profile. I really hope you enjoyed it. I plan on uploading a testing and combo video, being able to show you, so definitely look out for that. And I'm having a lot of fun doing this because this is something I actually wanted to do last year, but I didn't have the resources for it. But now that I actually have the new decks, I cannot wait to actually show them all off. And I hope that your holiday season starts out safely and everything, and just that you guys have a lot of fun this month. But like I said before with Infernities, it's a give or take. This is not going to be a deck that you're going to be able to take and is going to be top tier. This is definitely a fun deck, and I'm not saying anything bad about it at all. But, alright, so with that, thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next time. Later.